and welcome to GradCast, the official radio show and podcast of the Society of Graduate Students at Western University. I'm your host, Liam Clifford.
And I'm your co-host, Gavin Tolometti.
And we are here with Haider Al-Tahan today. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, Haider, tell us a bit about yourself. What's your trajectory look like? And, how did you end up here at Western?
Oh, dude. Oh, man. It's a quite long story, but I'll make it short. I think during my high school years, I wanted to do I was very into programming, but when I wanted to go into university, I didn't want to do programming at all. I wanted to do something different. And so I went into psychology. And during that point, I sort of knew nothing about psychology, and it sort of grew on me, and I wanted to do research in psychology. And I think during my second year, I was like, wait a second, I could also do computer science because it's not something that I haven't done before. I could do it. And so I started double majoring in computer science and psychology, and got involved into research. The first research that I got into was about memory and cognition, so something about working memory. And then I moved on to go into more computer sciencey. So I got involved in visuomotor. So it's how do we navigate our hand movement in relation to our vision. And then I also got involved into speech. I started working with a speech language pathologist from a kids hospital on trying to help individuals with articulation problem. And then lastly, I actually joined two labs that were strictly computer science, one who was focused more on audio and the other on vision. And that sort of like morphed my understanding of what I like to do and what type of research, what type of problems that I want to solve. And so when I joined Western with my supervisor, she does something similar. She sort of used neuroscience, computer science, and the projects are sometimes in between neuroscience and computer science, and other times it could be strictly computer science. I haven't done strictly neuroscience in a while now, since my undergrad. Yeah, but that is my background.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting journey you've taken to get where you are. Originally starting through high schools through computer science, and then looking at psychology and think, I want to be able to learn more about the human mind in a different way, but then realizing you could apply what you already knew to learning more about it. So, and then you started to look more, it started to include neuroscience into it as well. So with three different backgrounds that seem to be merging into one, what is like the main topic you're trying to focus on as part of your research?
So in general, I would say AI, but I'm also interested, so globally, I'm interested in building machines that are capable to navigate through our environment by themselves. So that would be my ultimate goal. But I guess the way I would reach to that goal, at least the way I see it, is to use this interdisciplinary ideas. So for instance, not only would I like to build modules that would build on eventually reaching this global machine where it is able to navigate through the world, but I would like to understand how does our human brain does it, so we could get inspired by it, hopefully, and make better machines. So one example of how this had happened before was in something like attention. So in psychology, we know what attention is. Attention is one of those mechanisms that allow us to focus on one thing and ignore whatever else is in our environment, whether it was for vision or for speech. So if we were sitting in a bar and there's a lot of noises, we know how to isolate that one sound that is talking to us directly. So in computer science, people have actually used this sort of idea of attention in neural networks. Neural networks is one of those algorithms that learn through data, right? I'm sorry if I jumped too far with this
No, no,
idea.
no. That's perfect. I think it provides context as to what a master's student in in the computer science department here at Western is really seeking to do with their research. So, where do you even begin with seeking to replicate human behavior and perception in machines? Like, I have no background in this. How would you perhaps explain it to someone who is not well versed in the field?
Replicating, so it depends on the question you asked is how can we replicate what we have in the human brain, right? Is that the sort of, so there's
More or less, yeah.
multi-layer, there's multiple layers to this question. Are we trying to mimic the output or the behavior, or are we trying to mimic the neuronal activation that happened in the brain? Do we want the same representation to happen in our neural networks, or do we want just the behavior? We don't care what the neuronal representation the neural network decided on, but we care what the output is. And that is it perceives the words as it is. So if I were to say, okay, let's say we want to come up with the best system that does the behavior, but we don't care about the intermediate layers or systems, then I would say, yeah, go on and start with AI and investigate, go through the computer science background. I think this is the most important thing. But if you're interested in maybe using some of the ideas in how our brain does it, or you want to replicate some of the neuronal, or if you want to also understand how the brain does it, you could even use those machines for this uh, for this task, I think.
Haider, Ariel here, the producer. Just wanted to butt in with a little question. You know, it's really cool to look at it on a broad scale. Like, how does it apply? What's the general goal of what you're doing? And I can really understand how interesting it would be to apply what you're doing to the idea of an algorithm or a computer functioning similarly to how humans or an animal functions inside of their brain. So on that level, it kind of makes sense for anyone who doesn't even understand how to do what you're doing. Could you maybe explain kind of on a day-to-day basis, what do you do? Presumably computers are involved, right? So how do you go from like, I'm sitting down at a computer and like step one, like, you know, what are you interacting with? What are the tools? What's a day look like for Haider?
Okay, so it depends on what type of question that I want to tackle. If it was pure computer science, typically that would involve looking at previous literature and understanding what has been done so far. Because in writing computer science papers, there is a huge emphasis on state of the art. So your algorithm, your whatever improvement you've added to the literature, supposed to show that in the results that on this metric it has better results. And so if I was to tackle computer science, I usually start with an idea of how I could improve on it, and then start computing that metric with the baseline, and then compare it with the baseline. Is it improving or is it degrading? Is it better or is it worse? So, and for computer science, that would be the idea. And most often than not, you would end up not getting anywhere. But if it was like neuroscience, computer science project, often you're interested in the results themselves and not relative to something else. Like, often, that's general. Just to make that clear. But you would start with, okay, so I have a neural network, I have a human brain. Now I want to compare them. Do they do the same? Do they operate the same way? Do they share the same representations? Do they share something similar, something different? That in by itself is somewhat exploratory and also is insightful. So I hope I answered. It very depends on the question itself, but yeah.
So in your particular research, there's been a lot of talk about, of course, how our research questions shape the research that we're engaging on. What particular questions are you currently dealing with, and how do you then apply that to your study?
I'm particularly interested in, I could explain my recent project that I'm very interested in
Yeah,
and that
please
I'm
do.
working on. So I brought up attention previously, and it was one of the things that I'm actually recently interested in is how can we have, um, how can we introduce an attention to a neural network? So if we were to give it an image, sure, it could go through this image and by itself, but I want it at some point, I want it to focus on a specific area. So if it was a scene and it had one person standing in the middle of the scene, I would want it at some point to focus on the face, or I would want it to focus on something in the body that would end up being very important for the end task. And the end task could be anything. So what I've done recently is use some of the previous literature where they showed something called self-attention blocks. So usually within a neural network, you're dealing with sort of like blocks. And these blocks are like sequences where you feed in your inputs, which could be an image, video, audio, anything. And then it would go through those blocks sequentially. So what I was thinking, previous literature, what they introduced is that they showed that, well, if we get one of the output of those blocks and then essentially fine-tune it in a way that would impose this sort of attention mechanism into it. And that has been my very recent interest in trying to solve. I'm not really solve, but try to improve. And my current idea is, well, what if we create a mini neural network that takes some high-level information from the intermediate layers and then cast it into this attention rather than get it strictly from the previous layer or previous block. And that what I'm thinking is that maybe that high level information would help this neural network do its job more efficiently. I would love, actually, if I had a chart right now, I could draw it out and it would look way more reasonable.
No, absolutely. I can certainly understand how it can be challenging to articulate some of these concepts that you're dealing with on a daily basis, and then trying to synthesize it all. So unfortunately, the podcast is devoid of said physical pleasures. So but no, really kind of interesting. I think it's interesting how you incorporate something that we certainly take for granted as human beings in attention, and how it seems to be almost fleeting nowadays in the digital age. So in regards, so I know you talk about a bit about the human brain. Now, I know this is an organ that we're continuing to learn about, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
How do what sort of data are you gaining from the human brain? Are you finding that the brain and the machines that you're comparing it with have a lot of similarities? Or are you finding that they are sort of inherently different in their compositions?
So little of both. I think so far what we've seen, if we were to train, and it's a very recent paper, not very recent, I think 2016, 2017. One of the authors is Taralba from MIT, where he showed that a deep neural network, a network that is trained on classification problem. So is it a dog, cat, whatever it is, how similar it is to the human brain. And what they did, the way they compared it with the human brain is they used two types of data, MAG and fMRI. And they looked at some area in the brain called the dorsal ventral stream. So this area in the brain responsible for specifically what the object is. And so what they found is that similar to the human brain, the neural network has goes from low-level information to high-level information to the of the image. So let me try to elaborate on this point. So the way our brain does it is, let's say this is our occipital lobe. We see a certain object, it goes to our occipital lobe. Then it goes to the dorsal ventral stream, right? Now, within the stream, there's multiple areas. Each area is responsible for a certain thing. Early areas that this information goes into are typically known to be more focused on low-level features. So features like edges within an image. And then the further you go into the stream, you'll see areas are more clustering or categorizing the certain object or components within an image. So actually there's multiple areas. There's a fusiform, which is responsible specifically for faces. I think there is also areas where they've been shown for like something like our hand or other body parts. Is there any other one that I'm not sure about? I think there are quite a few. There's scene, animates, and then objects are usually very versatile, or like there's no one area responsible for that, at least from what I know. Now, what's interesting is when we train this neural network, we see similar patterns. And so in the early layers, we see the output of those early layers within a neural network is that actually are useful to actually does the edge characterization. And then the deeper you go into our neural network, you will see that those deeper layers are responsible for like categorical information rather than low-level information. And that's what's interesting right now.
Yeah, I'm trying with all like training it to be able to identify and it will tell apart different images and categorize them. The human brain is complicated enough trying to figure out how we do that, but I can't imagine using a neural network and training artificial intelligence to be able to tell even two objects. Trying to think of a good example. I'm guessing like we have two objects that probably maybe look very similar. The best example I can think of is when you see a jacuzzi and a hot tub. That to us, we can tell that that's a hot tub and that's a jacuzzi, but I imagine if you try to explain that to a neural network, it's going to keep saying, it's either, for a while, it's going to keep saying, they're both hot tubs in my point of view. Is there anything that, from what you know of and from the background literature that you've read, have there been many troubles trying to categorize two different objects that we know are different, but the neural network has trouble distinguishing?
Yeah, I think those sorts of problem are usually discussed within literature as adversarial examples. So examples are very hard to guess. I am not quite sure about that literature. Like I haven't read a lot into it. But it's usually our main goal when we try to train those neural network is to do this sort of distinction between those two classes. And the way we train those neural networks is on a loss function. And the loss function is what we want this neural network to do is to optimize for this loss function and decrease to the minimum. So our loss function in case of classifying whether it's a cat, a blue cat, or sorry, a black cat or a white cat, right? Would be how correct are you at doing this task? So we keep asking it that same question with different images of different cats and then do this sort of distinction. So when we train those neural network, I would like to make this clear. we do not restrict it in any way. We do not tell it what the intermediate layers should be, or what the what the weights are, or what anything is. All we care about is, if we give it this image, we expect it to give us this output. And if it doesn't, then we're going to penalize it and ask it to update its weights. Weights is like its neurons, right? You could put on quotes. But it's neurons, where it finds a way where it it finds a way to update those weights to eventually reach the same accuracy. And so with more data, that's often why it's being said that with more data, we could actually get better results, because it sees more examples.
Yeah, it looks like it, like as with machine learning, as we expected, literally is just teaching itself, that you say, okay, here's the answer, and let's see your answer. Oh, your answer is incorrect. You're going to have to go back and redo everything and try to figure out how you can get to the right answer that we just showed you. And
Yeah.
since you showed so many examples, I imagine you probably have to give many different examples of the same type of image just to see if it could still identify what the object or creature is at, I guess, different angles, different. Does like shadowing have an effect on it as well?
Yeah, definitely. So one interesting thing, and I've worked on, and we've very recently archived this paper, is about self-supervised. So what I've told you so far is supervised. What we call it often is supervised learning. So we know the labels, and we're trying to teach this network based on these labels. So what I have recently archived is something called self-supervised learning. Self-supervised learning does not depend on the labels. And what we do is we say, if we have two images, both of them are cats, we expect the high-level information to be the same for those two cats. And if we had some other cat or a dog, we expect this high-level information to be different as much as possible. And so in my new work, we didn't do it on images, but it has been done on images. I've done it on audio. But what we do is use augmentation. And what augmentation does is, let's say you have an image of a cat. The way you would augment this image is by, let's say, masking a certain block within that image to be completely black, or to add some noise to the image by doing Gaussian noise. But it becomes really blurry that you can't even see it. Not even us can see it, right? So, and what you do is feed it to the neural network and say, I expect it to be the same representation or the same information at the end as. So the real one should be as close as possible to the augmented one, even though you can barely see it. And that is another type of learning where you could actually improve on the typical supervised learning by using this method. Yeah.
Very interesting. I tell you what, I'm learning loads. This is, again, like I said, this is completely out of my depth. And Haider, I didn't know if you saw Ariel's face. I believe he is in neuroscience, and the smile beamed across his face when you're mentioning parts of the brain. So
I was trying to see how long it would take for everyone to notice. Like, it's just see the corner of my eye just getting wider.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. I hope that I didn't say anything wrong.
No, it's no. We reassure you that you are in good faith in this conversation. Now, as our interview winds down, we always do like to ask how, at least in the COVID era, how the virus has impacted your research, if at all. Do you want to just speak to any implications that it's had, on your work thus far?
Oh, definitely. I think it definitely did affect my mental state in a way that I was going insane, to be honest, because I was sitting at home the whole day. It was just tiring at all times. So I decided even to go to the lab a few days of the week and just work there. That was one way to gain my sanity back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure many of us share that same sentiment. So, yeah, we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Was there anything you wanted to leave our audience with? Maybe a quick little message on, overall, the overall gist of your work.
Yeah, I have not covered all of the things that I've done, but for my most recent work, the one about supervised learning, if anybody is interested, you could either visit my website, HaiderAltahan.com, and you'll find the paper over there. But yeah, if anybody have any question after this too, feel free to email me. The email should be on my website too.
I guess I'll finish off with a nice question that we like to ask people. If somebody were listening and they were interested in the computer science, like you're doing, and they were like, "Wow, this is amazing," and I really want to study something like Haider's studying, and this sounds cool. How do I get involved? What would you be able to say to somebody like that? How does one get into this field, if not going necessarily via the
I think
tumultuous route you took?
Yeah, I think the best way to do it. I think I took a way non-easy route to how I got to this position, but I think I think the best way to get started is to reach out to supervisors and get to know them and tell them what you're interested in, and if they're interested too, they'll pitch you an idea, and who knows where that would take you. I think that's the best part. I think I learned more from my supervisors over the year than I've learned through courses. I think I hated courses, to be honest.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've been given the heave ho by the producer. So Haider, we want to thank you very much for coming on. I really do think that the application to attention is of utmost importance.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a
Yeah.
very, very interesting opportunity.
No worries. Well, this has been Gradcast, the official radio show and podcast of the Society of Graduate Students at Western University. I've been your host, Liam Clifford, and my co-host was Gavin Tolometti. We've been speaking with Haider Al-Tahan, and this episode was produced by Ariel. If you would like to be involved with the show or get in contact with us, email us at gradcastradio@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Gradcast Radio. To listen to us, we're on Radio Western 94.9 FM. You can also find all of our episodes on our website at gradcast.ca or on podcast apps like Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Alternatively, select podcasts have been uploaded to YouTube at Gradcast Radio. Thank you for listening and have a good one.